Hi, everybody. How's it going? Oh yeah, it's not a concert, right? Okay.
I got a question.
Wait a minute, there was more here a minute ago, so. Where do we go from here? That's a very good question, and some of you may know, that's sort of like the theme song at the end of my Twitch stream, I think now for 3.5 years. So I've tried sometimes to play a different song, but I get a lot of feedback saying, no, you gotta play Where Do We Go From Here? It's very appropriate. When we do anything in the simulator, there's so many things we can do, as a lot of you know. So it is actually very appropriate. It just kind of stuck. Where do we go from here? Why would I have a fuel tester in my hand? Because some of them know I usually put something like Gatorade in here, the blue one. And then I say to everybody on stream, I say, fuel is my fuel. And I take a sip of it. It freaks everybody out. Some of them never come back, right? So I thought I'd bring it along today just so you can see that. We'll get started with the session, you guys. Glad that you're here. Thanks for tuning in and thanks for being here. And if this is, apparently this is being recorded or being live broadcast, so wherever that camera is, hi at home, thanks for tuning in, thanks for registering. My name's Howard Forder of ForderLearnToFly. And these are my two friends over here. So let's go take a look at what's involved here. I'm not a CFI, but I have been a teacher, a professional teacher for years, and I actually did write curriculum for Microsoft, for IT for so long. But you know, servers and IP addresses and all that boring network stuff was a challenge for me to go into a classroom and teach that stuff to other fellow technical people. So I'm so glad that in my retirement I can teach flying, which is so much more interesting than IT stuff. So I bring those skills with me. I've been sharing flying since the first simulator back when I thought was 1982, but what we learned recently was actually 1979. And you know, back then the simulators, we thought we were doing something really cool with some really cool graphics. Compared to today, we just laugh and go, yeah, we actually flew an ILS back then into Chicago. But so I've been doing this a long time, and I have a series of Udemy courses on udemy.com on learning to fly. Those are going pretty well. They've been going for, I think, 15 years or so, and they're bestsellers on Udemy. So I've been encouraged to make the IFR course, which is pretty new now, and it's doing really well. And I'm in the middle of finishing production on the helicopter course, which is a big topic today with Microsoft and a big topic going into 24. And helicopters are a big challenge for a lot of people and a lot of fun. In real life, it's an expensive endeavor. In the sim, it's the same cost as any other airplane, of course, right? So that's a really cool thing I'm working on, keeping me busy lately. And I also have a YouTube channel, so I'm supposed to talk about those things. It's not always fun to talk about yourself like that, but I want to let you know there is a YouTube channel with some tutorials. Most of my YouTube videos are usually 2 hours because they are a learning session. They're long, they can be really too long. Scrub ahead to the points you want, come back to the points that you want to do a review on. So make sure you treat it like as if it were a multi-part series of teaching sessions. And that way, I get a lot of good feedback about that, saying that they like that format. So that can be something you can tune into also. And then finally, just to mention, we have a live, I'll give you a link that you can just, I'll give you a QR code you can just do a quick snap with your phone to all my socials so you can pick those up. But the Twitch channel is the one we do 3 times a week and keeps me busy. Tuesday lessons. Thursday we call Cockpit Chatter. We talk about anything aviation and sim. And then on Saturdays we do our group fly, and we invite all of you to come, beginner to most advanced. Come and fly with us. And we just fly in multiplayer somewhere in the world and just enjoy the scenery. We mainly fly GA small planes, which is what I do in real life. And we just simply enjoy the scenery that Microsoft provides to us in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So come join us on Twitch. That's Twitch TV, ForderLearnToFly. So let's get into, some of you, now after saying all that, some of you are saying, I still don't know who this guy is. Who is this guy anyway? So maybe this will help. Has anybody recognized this guy? 1 minute. Let's try something. Do you recognize me now? I can't keep wearing this thing. But that was fun. I mean, that's something Got Friends did for me. And that was really nice of them to do that. But I can't do that all day during the session, but it was a lot of fun. So that's, if you scan that, you can get the free Avatar Streamer series of avatars that you can put in the cockpit of your plane. That's pretty cool they did that. And I think they did that to some of us. I mean, Two-Tone Murphy, I think Burstix TV is in there, Can Do. You guys know some of these streamers. And we all help them by showing their products on stream because we love their products. And they just said, hey, let's make some avatars. So it's like, it's pretty cool to be included in that too. So we thank them for that. Okay, so let's continue on now. I just want to get into the meat of the system. I mean, let's go take a look at what's involved here. The topic is, and the description of the session is about Flying 101. It's a beginner series, we call it. So there's some things I'm going to show in here. How do you get started flying at home? And one of the things is, what kind of hardware do I need? Well, last year when I was here at FS Expo, the whole topic was hardware. My background is electronics. I used to be a TV serviceman before I started helping Microsoft. And so I built lots of things myself, my own circuit boards and stuff like that. And so I can speak about electronics, and I can speak about building your own systems, and that's what we did back then. We made a lot of our own stuff and modified a lot of our own stuff back then. But the flying hardware today, you can easily find inexpensive stuff, or as you can see out on the expo floor, you can spend a fortune. So where is it that it's cheaper to fly in the sim than it is to go and buy a real plane, right? You can actually spend a lot of money. But it just depends on how much realism you really want. My focus here today in this session is to talk about what are the private pilot skills. The very first certification that you can get, all pilots have to get, every single one of them have to get to start with, is called the Private Pilot Certificate. It's the PPL, you'll hear them call it. And if you know what those skills are, if you learn what those skills are, you can move on to anything else. And that's what they do. They move up to twin engine, then they move up to commercial, then they move up to teacher, CFI, get into the airlines eventually after thousands of hours. But they all started with a small plane with an instructor by the hour. And this is it. And so really, that's what I want to bring to you is if you could learn these skills, however you can learn them, then practicing on the simulator becomes something more real, or it becomes something more certainly needed, because you can't just jump into any aircraft and just like, I got it in the air, now what do I do? And we hear this on Facebook a lot. You tune into the forums, it's like, now what do I do? What's this button for? What does that do? And a lot of us have to be patient with them because they didn't go to ground school. They didn't go to any kind of formal teaching. And they're there on Facebook asking, what do I do now? And it's, some people are impatient with that. I still try to be patient as a teacher to help them with what their buttons are and what's going in front of them. But why not learn, first of all, what skills do we need to learn? And then when I go to the simulator, it can be more realistic because I'm doing it right. And then you can fly anything at all. So that's what we're doing. And then, so real world flight training, what's involved with that? And I certainly can't take you through all of it tonight in this one session. It's going to be a lot of stuff, but I can give you an overview. And I would like to leave you with one skill at least, give you one skill, even though I don't have a simulator in front of me today, and give you an idea of what you could go home and practice right away, or just go right next door here and practice it on one of their setups there and give that a try. So one skill today, that's what we'll do. I think that's a link to my socials if you want that. And that's just an easier way than trying to scribble down websites and stuff like that. All right, let's go take a look at this. What is flight training? Now, it can be done from a person who's qualified to do that. It can also be done in the simulator with an experienced person who's been in the simulator a long time. But I will give you a bit of a caution there. If they've only done simulator in their life, and your home simulator, they'll have habits that a CFI would correct right away. Home flight simulators feel very confident. They can fly, and we have friends who can fly complete airliners, complete huge, what we call tube liners, like they just announced today. We came into Vegas, some of us flew in here in the 737-8 MAX, the MAX 8. We flew in that actual plane coming here, right? And so some sim pilots can fly that kind of plane in all its complexities and its million switches. But are they doing it right? Do they have a CFI beside them, a chief flying instructor, a certified flying instructor who's looking at them saying, you're going to kill yourself? We don't have that accountability. We don't have that guidance. So we should have that guidance, even though we're flying in the sim, so that we can fly it the way planes are supposed to be flown. And we don't jump straight into a tube liner and pretend we know what we're doing with all those switches. So that's the purpose of learning to fly somehow. And I say somehow, I don't mean you should go out and get real flying lessons. They cost a lot of money. You pay by the hour for the airplane, you pay by the hour for the instructor. It's going to cost a lot. Let me tell you, it costs a lot. I had to find ways to shave down my private pilot training. So I'm showing you today the same thing that I did back in the 90s. I already bought my books from ground school in the 80s because I love this stuff so much, my love of aviation, that I studied. In the 90s, I stepped into a flying school and said, let's do this. And I paid by the hour every time I was there. That's the cheaper way to do it. And I flew in the smallest training plane that they provided because the rent was cheaper for a smaller plane, little 150. And I could only do a couple lessons a week or one lesson a week because that's how you make it affordable. I had a family, I had a mortgage, I had everything else. You can't just go and plunk down 20,000 and say, I want my license, unless you can do something like that. So the method I used got the attention of other CFIs and other flight schools. And eventually they pulled me in and had me write curriculum for them. Not rewrite the curriculum you have to have, but the order of it and the effectiveness of it so that they could retain their students longer. So part of the thing that I'm proud to say is that I've helped a lot of flight schools using Flight Simulator to supplement their training. I've knocked them down from about an 85% dropout rate down to around 50%. And you know, that kind of statistic just makes you proud. How did we do that? And that's what I'm about to show you here. All right, so in our home flight simulators, we don't have that accountability. And I get this question all the time, why can't we take those hours and put those toward our private pilot license? I'm practicing the right skills. Who knows you're doing well with that? Who's their accountability? Who's there looking at you saying, that's not right, I'll show you again, now you have control. You know, we don't have that we really do have in real flight training. So at home, they don't know what you've done, they don't know what you've practiced, they don't know if you put it on autopilot and went for coffee. So you can't use those hours. But you can, if you use them effectively, make your normal training accelerate, or if you're not taking any real training, it'll certainly make you a more effective pilot and more realistic. And that's really what my focus is and what my video courses do also. So that's what we want to focus on here and take a look at that. So as I mentioned, I'm going to start with flying hardware, just to give you an idea what kind of hardware can be used. So a lot of people ask this question. In my beginner series, I tell them just a yoke and a throttle quadrant. So like this. Yoke and a throttle quadrant. In my intermediate course, I say, now you got to learn cross controls, now you got to learn side slips and forward slips, you need pedals. And the reason I do it in those two steps is to keep the cost down. They just paid for my beginner course, they just bought the hardware, the yoke and the throttle quadrant, and I'm trying to keep the cost down and say, let's learn some skills first before we start synchronizing the pedals too. But I still say verbally to everybody, if you can afford pedals day one, get them. Because that's the way you learn to fly in real life. So the pedals are very important, and we're flying small planes first to steer on the ground, and while you're steering on the ground, your yoke is going to be turning in different directions than where you're turning. In other words, your pedals are actually moving you left and right on the ground. Your yoke is controlling the very ends of the wings, something called ailerons, and it's correcting for wind. And so most simmers, and I don't say most simmers that are already experienced, but most new simmers can't get that concept because they were never taught it in ground school, they were never taught it in real lessons, so it's so foreign to them. I'm pushing my left foot to make the airplane go down the taxiway that way, but Howard seems to have the yoke turned that way while I'm going that way, and it really, really messes people up. So that cross controls, that wind correction while you're taxiing, we do that in our lessons too in the sim, just so that you know that's what we learn in real life. And so I've brought real life lessons into the sim. And some of those shock people and some of those surprise people, but they're a better pilot because of it in the sim, and that's what we're talking about. But the one thing that most people forget to recommend is the trim wheel. Now the trim wheel is one of the most important things to learn when you're learning to fly. You're in a small plane, the trim wheel's not electronic. There's no buttons up and down like we can do in the sim. It's a wheel, just like you see here. It's a physical wheel that you move up and down just with the tips of your fingers. They've got little knobs on the end. You don't even look at it. It's intuitive. You use your throttle, you use your mixture, and you use your trim wheel. That's it right there, all in front of you. And so you set that up at home the same way. And so now with that trim wheel, the whole purpose of it, in every single phase of flight, you use your yoke to get the attitude, and by attitude we mean you're climbing, you're level, or you're descending. Those are the basic ones. You're turning. But this, when you have the pitch of climbing, level, or descending, you don't hold the yoke there forever. What if you're climbing to 20,000 feet? And you're still, with all that pressure, and you're holding on, and you're trying to, so you, in a real plane, there's a lot of pressure there. So you pull the yoke until you're climbing at the right speed, and you trim it. And it's a nice fine adjustment. And at that point, you can actually let go of the yoke, you're still climbing. And it's not an autopilot, it's just your plane is balanced and it's trimmed properly. And you need this skill or you will never get your pilot's license. All right, and so this is a skill, again, that simmers are surprised that I teach, is like, don't forget to trim it. I'm gonna leave you with one skill today, and one of those skills is trimming. It's gonna be a 3-part, simple thing, but the simplest thing at the end is trim it, trim it. And that's what I mean, is use the trim wheel. So that's the sort of thing that you should invest in if you want to be realistic in your flying. So that's just the hardware, and I'm not going to dwell along. Last year at this session, I talked about hardware. The whole session was hardware. It was PC versus Xbox. It was all this different hardware, almost every piece of hardware you can find today. All right, I'm not doing that today. I don't have enough time in this session. I want to focus on the skills and the curriculum that you would need to know. But I will mention one more thing, though, and one thing that we helped with last year. They previewed it, premiered it here, and I tested it to see if it would actually be something that we can use. And it was something that was really unique, and it just took off, if you'll pardon the expression. And it was called the Yaman Arrow. I'm not here to sell it, you guys, but I'm just here to endorse it, because this is my portable solution when I take my laptop on the road like I do here. Take my laptop on the plane and I'm heading away from home, and while I'm in the hotel, I want to brush up on something, I'll use my portable cockpit. It doesn't even look like a cockpit. As a matter of fact, it looks more like an Xbox controller. But this has vernier. I'm not going to get into all the details, but you can see at the bottom, it has sliders you pull in and out, which could go for any axis you want. It could be used for mixture. It could be used for throttle. It's got views. It even has autopilot and stuff like that, but I don't use it for that. And you can fly completely. You notice one thing on the left that most or all Xbox controllers don't have, and that's a trim wheel. You notice the trim wheel on the far left? And that is the selling point right there. With this controller, you can set your attitude, and can you imagine holding your thumb on that little tiny thumb thing and trying to hold 70 knots on a climb at 500 feet per minute? I mean, these are the sort of thing a CFI might ask you to do. Hold a climb at 70 knots at 500 feet per minute, and you're there going, I can't. My thumb just can't do that, not consistently. So it's got a trim wheel, and you trim it. You do the same exact thing you would do in a real cockpit, although that doesn't feel real, but at least you can still do the skill, right? So I just wanted to mention that, and that's all the hardware I'm going to show you today. But there's plenty more hardware out there that you can take a look at, and all of that stuff is some of it's very expensive, but man, they got some good hardware there, don't they? So let's just take a look now at the actual curriculum, you guys. We're going to, the focus of why we're here. So real world flight training. The whole curriculum of it, every pilot starts out with this, right? They start out with this real world training of, here's your curriculum. It's going to take you 45 hours or so, which I'm going to talk about. And it's going to take you this much money, hopefully. And I'll tell you a secret that a lot of people don't tell you from the flight schools, is that it's going to cost you more than that. And it's going to take more time than that. Very few people finish their pilot's license in the recommended hours. Those are the minimums. You've got to have that many hours or you just don't get your license. And that's got to be in your logbook. Most student pilots go to 60 hours, and I know some that went to 75 before they finally got their license. That's a lot of money, a lot of time. So, you know, they have the minimums, and that's what we're going to talk about here, right? So they have to get their private pilot license first. No matter what you're going to fly, you got to have your private pilot license first. That's the first ticket or the first certification. Some of us stay there. Some of us don't go and get our instrument rating. Some of us don't go to commercial and start making money with flying. Some of us fly for recreation like I did. And so that's what you want to take a look at is you need this. Everybody needs this or you can't get into an airplane. So that's what I'm going to look at, right? So depending on your country, generally you need 45 hours of dual and solo. And what dual and solo means is you go with an instructor for the first 10 or 15 or so until they see that you have full confidence in talking on the radio, managing the plane in all phases of flight, takeoffs and landings, all the curriculum really. They see that you're confident and you can do all that. Your solo flight is actually one circuit around the airport without the instructor. It's a milestone for pilots and student pilots to get to their solo. Once they have their solo, an instructor can say to them, when they show up for their lesson, the instructor can say, here's the briefing for today. You're going solo. Go out to the practice area and practice what we've been practicing alone. That's how it works. And then you will go out and practice some of those skills and keep doing it and keep doing it. You'll come back and the instructor will say, okay, today's a dual. I'm going out with you. We're going to do something new. That's how it works, you guys. And when it's a dual, it costs you more because you got to pay for the instructor by the hour. And this is real life stuff I wanted you to know about. But you need the minimum 45 hours of that before you can even be recommended to go for your flight test. That's a good thing to know. But it adds up quickly, and most people go over that. As an aside, I want to mention that I was lucky. I'm saying lucky, although instructors said that I was talented, I'm skillful. Excuse me. They came up with all these words. It was luck. It was luck because I took the lesson of the day, exactly what it was, and it could have been just straight and level, keeping the same altitude, keeping the same direction. It could have been controlling the plane, trimming it. That's the lesson. I don't know how to land yet. And I would go back home and I'd do the same exact airport, same exact runway, same exact airplane. And I would do the same skill again and again and again. And I would go back to the flight school the next time and we would go up dual and he would say, okay, show me what we did last time. And boom, I nailed it. And it's not because I was better than anybody else. It's because I practiced at home in my flight simulator. But I practiced the exact skill that was at the moment. The savings isn't evident right away. I didn't sit there going, gee, I just saved like $50. You know, you might think of that, but you never really know the number until you finish and get your license. And when I talk to people who were in the same ground school that I was in when I first started, you get to network with these fellow student pilots. We're all fresh, we're all new. By the time they got done, they were into the 60 and 75 hours. By the time they got done, they were in for $20,000 to $30,000. I did my training in a third of the time. I mean, the third of the cost, I should say. The time had to still be the 45. I had to wait till the 45 to go do my flight test, and I nailed it. But all because I practiced and practiced and practiced. The sim isn't exactly the same. You're not going to get the same sensations. You're not going to get the same fear for your life that you get in an airplane if something goes wrong, right? But you can still practice a lot of those routine things that we learn without burning gas by the hour, right? And so a lot of you know that already, but I'm proof of that way back in the 90s. And that's the reason flight schools came to me and said, how'd you do it? And I helped them to do it too. And I helped other CFIs who wanted help. Some didn't want help. I don't need a sim pilot teaching me how to teach. You know? So I had that roadblock too. All right, so it's good to know that. So we also need 45 hours of ground school. And what ground school is a lot of the theory. It's all of the theory. And we get books to read and study. And we got tests to write. And we got to get a radio license and learn how to do the talking on the radio and the right phraseology. And there's so much to learn. And ground school can be kind of dry. You know, almost like teaching IT, you know. I mean, I know what that's like, right? But ground school can be dry. But you know, we need that knowledge. The meteorology, we're going to fly in the weather. Can we fly in that weather? Are we allowed to fly in that weather? What's the weather going to be like? We got to know everything. We got to know what kinds of clouds. We got to know everything about, can we allowed like legally to fly through that stuff? Or, you know, there's stuff we need to know. Theory of flight we start with, just understanding how that plane actually flies. I mean, everything. The engines that we have in our airplanes, we actually have to know something about them in case they conk out or something goes wrong. So there's a lot of information which we're not going to get through today. In my video lessons, I give them a bit of information from a ground school, and then we get into the skill, and then we finish. And I'm trying to keep them into smaller lessons. And so I do give them some ground school without them having to take the long, boring ground school. But in real life, you need the 45 hours. You need someone to sign off on your attendance that you actually attended 45 hours of instruction. And then there's a final flight test, and then there's a final written exam. The flight test is, it's really something that will make you very nervous, because like any test, you've got an examiner there with a notepad, and they're very quiet. They're not there now to teach you or correct you. They're there to assess you. And they're right there in the front seat beside you, shoulder to shoulder. These planes are not big. And they've got their notepad out, and they've got it tilted just enough so you don't see what they're writing. And they're scribbling, and they're looking over. And I think they practice this, you know. It's like, and you get nervous. It's like, yeah, I don't think I did so well, you know. You come in, you land, you grease it, you put it away, you do everything right. It's like, I'm sure I didn't pass. And they just turn to you and go, brilliant. Okay, which part? All of it. Oh, wow. You're just shocked, right? But, you know, this is something we all have to go through. And then that's not the end of it. That's the start of it. Now we have a license to fly, and we're green, as they call it. We're still dangerous. And so we can ask at any time for an instructor to come with us. You know, I mean, that's the proper way to do it. Now, here in the sim, can you imagine calling an instructor saying, come on over to my house, I want you to fly with me this time because I'm not sure if I'm going to kill myself? You go, Howard, it's a sim. You know, so they have to remind you that you can't kill yourself in the sim. But, you know, this is the thing we can do, and we are solo, right? We're solo from day one. We don't have a person sitting there helping us through this. So you need some kind of guidance, like video courses. Some of you will do YouTube to find answers for that. Some of you will watch a streamer who does that well. These are the resources we'll use to learn to fly here in the sim. But, you know, we don't have to count all our hours. We don't have to wait till we're at 45 hours and somebody magically gives us a pilot's license. It doesn't happen, you guys. It's not going to happen. So, but that's how it happens in real life. And that's what you have to do to get your license. Okay, so to do all of that, to be able to practice that at home, you've got to get a computer that can manage the graphics at least to the point where it's smooth. That's all we care about. We don't care about FPS and go get this kind of brand of graphics card and make sure your PC does this and get the best hardware. I see people going out and spending $5,000 and $6,000 and $7,000 to set up their sim just because Johnny's turning 16 and he wants to fly. You know, and then they find out they have no interest whatsoever. Now they got to turn around and sell it. But my point is, an Xbox S or X, and I'm not saying that just because Microsoft was on the stage before me, but I'm saying the Microsoft X or S, there are literally millions of flyers in Microsoft Flight Simulator using that. And they're even flying airliners, which is the most complex thing to do. That's hard on those systems. But they're learning all these basic things. This 172 you see in this picture, every picture I'm using here is from the simulator. And this is the common plane that I'll use to help others train in. And that's the plane that I graduated to after I finished my pilot's license. I went from the little tiny 150 into a 172 that holds 4 people. And it's cheap enough to rent by the hour and take friends golfing or take friends somewhere. A lot of fun. But the whole idea is at least get smooth graphics. And there are low settings in the sim, and at least you can still see the landmarks, because we always have to look out the window for flight training. Flight training is not by instruments. We learn to look at the instruments. We learn to scan them for a split second, just like you do in a car. You glance at your dashboard. You can see what speed you're going. At some point, you may glance and see how your gas tank is doing. But you glance. In flying, in learning to fly, it's out the window all the time. You're scanning for traffic, you're looking for your attitude. When you're actually turning, you're looking out the window. How does that look like when you're 30 degrees? How does that look like in a steep turn? Now do that consistently. Let's do it again. And that's what you're doing out the window. You're not even looking at the instrument and going, I'm exactly 32 degrees, I'm pretty close. We don't do that. And that's instrument flying. You're going to do instruments for sure. And eventually you might want to fly with just instruments. That's a whole new rating. And that's a rating where you have to rely on them and cross-check and make sure that if that instrument isn't telling you the right thing, then how else can I get that information? That's scary stuff. You're flying through complete fog with no reference to the ground or any other plane, and you got to rely on those instruments. That's the next step you would do after you get good with VFR out the window, with visual flying. So visual flying is what we do. And as a fact, in our Twitch stream, we get together, we go fly, and we stay low. We don't climb to 20,000 feet and set the autopilot. We climb to 2,000 feet and hope we clear the mountain. Or we see some antenna on the ground and like, oh, we got to fly at least 1,500 or we're going to hit something, you know? And we can still see the ground, we can still see the rivers, we can still see the canyons. We have a ball. And that's VFR flying. This is why I became a pilot, so I can explore and I can just travel somewhere close by. I'm not going long distance and paying rentals for that. So that's something to think about. That's what you're learning in your first your certification for private pilot. You're learning out the window, visual flight rules, VFR. All right, the training airplane, I mentioned them already, so we don't have to dwell too much on it, but you can see here, this is a plane from your local flying school. So my suggestion is, even if you're not gonna take real flying lessons from a real flying school, like physical, go to the school thing, find out what planes they use. Well, I'm gonna help you with that, I'll give you a list right now. And that's the plane that you should be trying and learning your lessons on in your home. That's the plane you should be practicing with in your home. Don't go practice with a 737. I'm gonna go learn to fly on a 737. You know, that's not realistic. Nobody does that in real life. You can't. So what kind of planes would they learn to fly on? And we're gonna go take a look at that. Let's pick the same plane that they'd have in your local flying school. So the common ones that are there, the Cessna 152. Now I learned on a 150, there's still lots of those around, 152 similar in engine and specifications. We have that in the sim. Everything I'm showing you here, we have in the sim here, Microsoft Flight Simulator. The Cessna 172 is the most common in flight schools. As we're reminded in our sim, it says sometimes on the splash screen, over 40,000 of them were made. Well, it's the highest production airplane in the world, and it's still being made. And the oldest one that I've flown that I rented was from 1956, which makes it about, I just calculated it the other day for my Twitch stream, it was something like 58 years ago. I flew a plane that was made 58 years ago. Now, the plastic inside the plane was rattling when I landed, and my passenger wasn't very comforted by that. Are we gonna die? No, it's just it's old. It's just an old plane, but it's good. And so, you know, that's what can happen. That 172 is so good and so well made as a trainer forgiving plane for students that it is the plane of choice, and it's good for operators for cost. But there are other planes, and the more modern schools, or the schools that can afford it, will move up into the glass cockpits. The Diamond series have the glass cockpits. They got the G1000s, and they're gorgeous, and they got a stick, and they're made of fiberglass or composites, and oh man, it's such a dream to fly. And I remember sitting in one of the first ones that were ever made and going, whoa, what's a G1000? Now I teach lessons on it, so. But that's a beautiful plane. The Diamond also makes the DA-40, which is the equivalent of the 172. I mean, it's got single engine, non-high performance seats for people, you know, that kind of plane. And that's what you learn on also. Just looks different inside. You still got to learn all the same skills. And then the low-wing airplanes like this, well, the Diamonds were the low too, but the Piper PA-28, these have been around for forever. The Cherokee and the Archer, you'd hear about people talking about learning on these planes. And they're still at the schools too. They keep them all up. The maintenance schedules are pretty rigorous. And finally, which we just saw out here, I think, Andrew, I think it was the Cirrus 22 that we just saw, the SR-22 out here. There's a setup like that at the Real Sim Gear booth. It's like, ooh, that's sweet. And that's becoming a very common training plane now in the modern flight schools that have upgraded their planes. So if that's what the local school has, if that's what you're going to fly in for your discovery flight or your training, why not fly in that in the sim? And then you've got something you can relate to, the same thing you just saw in real life. And so that would be something you might want to. I might give you a little added comfort there that the SR-22 and the SR-20 have optional parachutes in them for the whole airplane. Is that comforting? I think it's optional. I don't think it's standard, is it? Does anyone know? I just know that it's actually a rocket behind your seat, and if you do eject that rocket, it'll go through your rear window, and it'll make a parachute, and your plane will just land wherever it's gonna land. So look out. I quite honestly, in training, you're taught if the engine goes out in all planes and helicopters, if the engine goes out, you're taught to glide and pick a field and glide and land where you want to land within a certain radius of gliding. But still, you can actually pick an open field instead of a parachute that's gonna drop you down on somebody's house, you know? So I'd rather be in a plane that I can glide. I'd do that first before I'd actually activate the parachute in real life. But apparently, Cirrus has had something like 232 parachutes deployed since they invented that feature. I don't think the plane is, yeah, it's true, right? Andrew says the plane is not happy afterwards, yeah. It probably could sustain some damage, that's for sure. But then again, sometimes if you glide into a farmer's field, it's all mushy, you might nose over. So, you know, gliding is also dangerous too if you're in a highly congested area. I learned to fly at Toronto Island Airport, and you're gonna see a picture of that right here. And so this is the approach to runway 26 in the sim at Toronto, Ontario, Canada. That's where I'm from. And so this is on approach. Now, what do you guys think? We got some experienced simmers in here that just tuned in to see, I don't know, what's Howard gonna talk about. What do you think of that approach? Is that good? I heard one person say too low, maybe. I don't know, it's like, you know, just looking, you know, some of you may look at that and go, you kidding? Apart from the violin being in the way. But it's doable, but it is low. But I'll say this, in visual landings, you can correct for that. I give it some more power just to stretch it. But if I were too high, I would do a side slip. You know, can you do a side slip? Can you do a forward slip? What can you do? Well, we're given these skills so that whatever it looks like, we can correct that. You know, and we know what to do. We're confident with it. We have to handle that bird with confidence and get people safely back on the ground. But the point is, this is exactly what it looked like in my training. I trained with conventional dials like that. And that's the exact same thing that happened to me again and again and again when we came back into land. And I practiced that in the sim, and it's great. And if you drop it in the lake, well, just reset the sim. You know, I mean, it's such a good thing, right? If you were to put that in the lake. One time I came back to this airport in the 150 with a storm coming. We were told on the radio, we were out practice area. I was told on the radio, get back now. A storm's coming. I mean, they don't usually talk like that on the radio. It's very polite, right? Yeah, like in November 672, can you please return to the airport? Well, of course I will. But you know, it's all polite. But this time it was like now. And so we firewalled it all the way to the airport as fast as a 150 could go, my instructor and I. And we put it down on a carrier landing, if you know what that is. And we put the 150 over where it's supposed to be, and we tied it down. We heard there was this violent storm coming that wasn't even in the predictions. We just tied it down, and we were running to the hangar when the rain started already, and we got wet, and then the wind started too. Well, there was another 152 behind us that wasn't so lucky. And he came down, did a carrier landing, and brought it over, and they were just getting the ropes to tie it down, and the wind just flipped it right over on its back. And to see that in real life is scary. To see it in the sim is like, hey, he's got to reset. You know, it's not such a bad thing. But I got memories there at that place. I was playing the violin. I was going to mention what that violin is, so I better get to that point too, right? So scenarios that you can practice, which is part of, you know, the lineup that I wanted to talk about. Scenarios at home, you can practice all of them, right? But there's some scenarios that you'll have to do with an instructor, of course, and they have to assess if you're doing it right. But the point I want to make here, and that's why the violin is there, we can practice real-world lessons and procedures, but if we just jump in the plane and I think I'll just try to land it. Who needs an instructor? And it's, you know, I say it's akin to playing the violin without having lessons. Any musicians in the crowd? And I'll say that because you've been playing an instrument. That makes you a musician, right? So any musicians in the crowd? Has anyone here tried a violin? Are you good at it? By somebody else's statement or standard, they think you're good at it, right? Your wife or somebody, like they think you're good at it, right? And I was going to ask how long, right? So, I mean, I play instruments, and I've played guitar all my life and all this stuff. And I thought, what's the hardest instrument I would be challenged with? And my wife said, violin, for sure. There's no frets on it. It sounds like the screeching cat when you first start. And it did for 2 years. And I remember coming through the airport once in business, right? And I was taking it with me to the hotel. I got a mute for it, and I'm going to practice in my hotel room at night. And the security guard at the airport says, play us a tune. I said, you don't want to hear a tune. He says, it's Christmas time, play a Christmas carol. I said, I'll sing it for you. I'm not playing the violin, right? But you know, that's something that does take, just like a lot of hard things in life, it takes an instructor to guide you through and to listen to you and to help you refine it and help you make it sound and sing the way a violin should. And that's going to take a lifelong kind of commitment. This is the same thing here, you guys. If you're going to learn to fly, if you're going to want to do that confidently and feel the satisfaction of handling that airplane from start to finish, you need to have some direction. And you need to have someone who can actually look at your performance and say, okay, try this, or you're missing something. And I do this on a regular basis with my online students. This morning, before I even came downstairs and met everybody for breakfast or whatever we were doing, I was late coming down because I was assessing 2 videos. One was a steep turn video and one was a straight and level. Beginner pilots that are just taking my courses. And I look at their videos and I comment on them. And I'm very positive about it. I don't say ever that you're wrong. I just say you're forgetting about trim or your climb was too steep. Try it for 70 knots. Try to, I give them suggestions. And I say, just send me another video afterwards. And they're using something in Microsoft Flight Simulator called Flight Recorder, and it's a very simple tool. You open it up on the screen, it's a little box, and you just hit record, that's it. And they send me this file afterwards, and it's like a binary file, it's like a black box file. And I replay that file on my sim, and I see exactly how they're doing. And I look from the outside of the plane and get that outside view of their attitude. I go behind the plane and see how they're doing coming in for landing, which you can't do in real life. Can you imagine the instructor opening the doors? I'll just step outside here, look at your attitude, right? It's like, it doesn't work, right? It's like, what? But so that same thing here, it's the same as playing the violin. It's like, it can be crappy forever in your life. You just, I'm not good at it. It's a skill that anyone can learn with discipline. And flying is no different. So let's take a look. Here they are. Here is what I call the 6. These are the 6 skills you will learn in private pilot training over the course of 45 hours. During that time, you will bank on your information that you learned in ground school for the navigation part. You'll practice navigation, but it's stuff you learned in the ground school. So in lieu of that, you would study books on it, all right? Or watch YouTube videos or take some videos on it. And the number 8, there's radio communication. And again, I put in there not a basic flying skill. It's not managing the airplane. But now think about the distraction of this. And this is the hardest part for pilots, and it's one of the areas that they can do without being in a real plane. And that is speaking on the radio. And so I'm going to give you a hint on how you can start on that, even now, today, before you even leave this room. How you can start on learning to talk on the radio confidently and understand what they're actually saying. The first hint I'll give you is tune in. And today we have lots of resources on the net. We've got all kinds of atc.net, and maybe you guys can name a few others where you can tune in and hear them, but it sounds crazy. I don't know what they just told them, but they're moving. So, that's how it starts, right? And then you start learning the phraseology or get used to it. It's almost like learning a new language, right? But what we really want to do when we take a look at that, let's just take a look at a quick suggestion here on what we can do to learn a little bit about phraseology. Because if you don't know this, you can't do VATSIM, you can't do Pilot Edge, you can't do any of those that you see listed here. Say Intentions AI, beautiful, quick rising ATC done with AI. Brian, the developer of this, has been on our stream even when it was first starting. The thing is just taken off like a rocket, unbelievable. And what's nice about that is that's an AI ATC. So if you can be frustrated and say the wrong things, it's not going to roll its eyes. It's not going to tell you, like, where'd you learn to talk on the radio? It's not going to give you a scolding. It's not going to make anything unsafe. So I like that. I'm bold enough and brave enough to speak to an AI ATC, and it'll just give me the information that I need, which is pretty cool, you guys. We've come to that age now, and that thing is one slick product. I think, was it today or yesterday they announced they brought the price down, made it more affordable. Brian said they would, and they did. So, I'm so happy to see that thing take off, because that's going to help us become better pilots. And then if we are in VATSIM or we're on Pilot Edge, we can speak to real controllers, and we can actually say the right things.
What's the company name?
It's called Say Intentions. It's on my screen there. It's like the last bolded one there, right? SayIntentions.ai, right? They're out here. I think if you just go out and just turn far left. Am I right, Andrew? Far left, you just... So you'll see, yeah, when you come in the doors, turn right, you'll find him, right? And just go to Brian and say, Howard sent you. He'll probably send you away. No, he'll bring you in. All right, so let me just mention, you guys, one of the secrets here that you can start with today. I feel like I'm doing an infomercial. You can start today if you call in the next 30 seconds. I'm just kidding, right? So you can actually start by learning the phonetic alphabet. That's what they call it. I know in elementary school we learned phonics, and it's the same thing. And what that means is every letter of the alphabet is said phonetically on the radio. I know some of you in this room know that already, right? But the point is, if we didn't, on a radio that's not perfectly clear, and I could talk about the frequency band because I used to fix these things, but on the radio where it's not perfectly clear, they can't tell the difference between a B and a D. It just sounds the same. And now you've given them the wrong letters. Now you're on the wrong taxiway. Now you're causing something unsafe in real life. So they use phonetics to say the letters. So the letters of your plane, you would say it with phonetics. The taxiways that you're taxiing on, instead of saying alpha, sorry, I'm going to just naturally say it. Instead of saying A, B, C, D, they say Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. And so now you start to understand the phraseology when you tune in. Now you're going to hear them say taxi, Alpha, Bravo, Fox to Fox 1 or something like that, hold short of 24. You just go, what did he just say? I have no idea. So this is why you learn the phonetics. How do you learn them? It's memorization. This is one of those things in ground school. It's memorization. Take this chart, put it up on a wall somewhere, and every time you see it, learn another letter. And here's what I did, and I mentioned it in here, you guys. I think I've mentioned it at the bottom there, yeah. I've mentioned that the minute I came out of ground school and saw this phonetic thing, I looked at my car and I looked down at the gas gauge and it said fuel. And I said, Foxtrot, Uniform, Echo, Lima. That was my first ATC phrase. It's like, whew. I was so proud of myself. But you know, like no one else would be able to be excited about it like I was. So, yeah, Rad's not here yet. So there's a fellow on our stream, he actually he types in chat, he types in Foxtrot, Uniform, Echo, Lima, and I have to go and take my fuel, which is actually Gatorade. I have to take my blue fuel, which I couldn't bring with me on the plane, and I have to take a sip out of it at the time, because every time he does that in chat, that's the joke, right? That fuel is my fuel. But you know, that's the funny thing, and that's phonetics, right? And that's what we have to learn. So that's what you can do right today. You walk up to any of those booths and read something, say it phonetically. They go, oh, you're a pilot. You know, it's this whole new language now. You're in, you know, that's what you can do. All right, let's go take a look. Real world flight training, we're down to the last few points here. So the first and most important rule in learning to fly, I know people say, you know, aviate, navigate, communicate, those are the normal things we learn, but here's the first rule, don't stall. Of all the other rules, it doesn't matter how much you know, how much skill you've learned, or how talented you are, or how good you did on your grades. If you stall your plane, you're dead. It's a horrible statement. I don't want to say that. It's like echoed in the room when I said it, you know. So we don't want to stall the plane. And so the whole idea is, for those who are new to flying and flight simulation, stalling the plane means you've stopped flying. It doesn't mean the engine. I know we use this expression with our engine. I stalled on the highway. The engine is actually stalling. It stopped. I don't know what it is, but I coasted to the shoulder and I'm good. In a plane, if you stall, it means the wing does not have enough lift to keep you flying, and it's going to drop like a rock. Those things they're heavy, and it's just remarkable that they can actually fly. But you will fall out of the sky. So that's our first rule of thumb, and we judge this by the airspeed when we're learning to fly. We learn to fly. I'm going to say right now, looking at that airspeed indicator, you see there's a 40 there at the bottom of that white arc. See the 40? You go below 40 knots, in other words, you're too slow, there's not enough airflow to keep you afloat anymore. And you're going to see this, or you're going to see it just completely drop. And that's dangerous. Now, we learn that in flight school, but we go out to a practice area, we go to altitude, we might be 4,000 or 5,000 feet or 6,000 feet, and we'll intentionally stall the plane. How's that for flight school? I mean, you're never going to go back to that instructor again. Are you kidding me? We were falling out of the sky. And the instructor did some magic and kept us going again. So what they do is we learn a recovery procedure after we stall. And the point of it is so we never do it again. So we can understand and we can feel the airplane is about to stall. And we can look at the airspeed and, ooh, I'm going too slow. For whatever reason, whatever distraction, or however you got it to that attitude, you recognize it and you correct it right away. You don't go into a stall and then correct it just for fun, all right? And so that's something that you learn in school so that you don't do it in real life, because that's the most dangerous part. And where is it most dangerous, Mike? He says, oh, you're going to ask me a question while we're on stage? Where is a stall the most dangerous? On the ground. close to the ground as you're taking off or as you're coming into land. Those 2 points in life, you are close to the ground, and even if you knew how to recover from a stall, you need a few hundred feet. You don't have a few hundred feet, you're gonna hit the ground. So that's why they teach us. If we're up at altitude and we're thousands of feet and we lose a couple hundred feet and we go, ooh, sorry everybody, I'm level again, I'm good, you're still alive, but on the ground or near the ground, and that's when we're the slowest, isn't it? We come into land slower. We take off, we're slow. And that's why we have to learn that one thing. Keep it important. That's an important thing. Never stall. All right, and if I could, mention the second rule in here. And this second rule, this is a rule, you guys. It's not a flight skill. The rule is keep at it and keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. Discipline. Those of us who have our license had discipline because 85% of students drop out. 85 drop out, 85%. And when I ask them, what made you quit? I can give you the top 10, but the top 3 are money. Somebody here said it. Money's the first thing. As I've told you guys, they tell you, 45 hours is gonna cost you $15,000. And after you got your license and you've now spent $28,000, what happened to 15? It's just like they sold me on 15. Eventually I'd pay 15, but now I've realized I've spent 28. So, there's that. Money thing makes people drop out. I can't keep paying through the nose and all this. It's an expensive endeavor. The second reason, anybody know in the crowd? What'd you say? Time. The time discipline. We have jobs. My career got so busy, I was like teaching all day and studying all night. It's like people would ask me a Seinfeld question, hey, it's like Seinfeld. I say, who's he? I had no idea what's, anything going on in the world because my career got busy and I couldn't fly until that Sunday afternoon when the sky was blue, So time is an important one too. It's a commitment. Getting to the airport, the briefing before your flight lesson, the lesson itself, the briefing afterwards, and driving home. Oh, did I mention there's some studying you got to do and maybe practice on the sim? So, there's some commitment there, you guys, that not everybody can do. I was very lucky. I was in the Canadian Armed Forces. I went in as a long-haired hippie with a guitar, and I came out with a clean-shaven head and a work ethic. And it's like I learned discipline. It's by osmosis. You just have to. But, and then I applied that to when I went to learn to fly after I could afford to do it in the 90s. So, that discipline got me through, and I had hard times at some skills. And one of those skills was coming into land, and I teach that now because it's clear as a bell, but coming into land, I had a hard time with the instructor I had. Just loved this instructor. She was excellent. And in a small 150, she was thin, so we could actually fly within weight and balance limits. So it was perfect. I liked her. But I wasn't getting the landing part properly. There's a skill there, and it can be easy if you know how. And once the bell was rung, once it was clear as a bell, I was good. But she did the professional thing. She said, I'm going to put you with John, and we're going to see if John can, show you a different way. And I nailed it right away with John. But out of the same respect that she gave me, I went back to her to finish because she led me all the way to here and she had the professionalism to send me to another instructor. And that got me over the hump and that saved me a ton of money too because I know a person who went, not with her, but I know a person who went with their instructor and they spent over $2,000 just learning to land because they didn't get it. And today we're going back up and we're coming in, we're doing circuits and we're gonna land all day long. And then they went back the next time, we're gonna land all day long until you get it. We're just gonna hammer until you get it. And they just spent money after money after money. And then they said, what, did you have that trouble, Howard? Yep. How'd you solve it? Another instructor, right? And that's something you can think about too, right? It's got to click, right? The instructor and you have a relationship. All right, so let me just mention as we finish up here, real world flying here. I recommend that you're using Flight Simulator, not because I know Microsoft people. I was the trainer for Jane. I don't know if you've met Jane before. Jane Reynolds is the senior community manager for Microsoft. She's out on the floor with her team. CDL does the group flies on Fridays now at Microsoft, and he works with her. He's a community manager. I designed from scratch, and Andrew and I, who's in the crowd tonight, my co-host from Twitch, we worked on her stream, on the Microsoft official channel stream, for 2 years. I was a guest trainer teaching Jane how to fly. And I wrote the curriculum, and I watched how she was progressing, and I helped her, because she's in charge of Flight Simulator. she should know what's involved in learning to fly. So that was it, and that's how we did it, and it came over really well. We started out with just 2 lessons. Let's see how it goes. If there's no interest, I'm out of here. You know, that was the contract, the verbal contract that we have. And so I'm not recommending Microsoft Flight Simulator because of Jane and my relationship with Microsoft. I'm recommending it because I went from X-Plane to Microsoft Flight Simulator because I'm a VFR pilot and because student pilots are VFR pilots. And when a teacher tells me in a plane when I'm learning to fly that the circuit is here, you go up to the Home Depot and turn left. You go over to the end of the Toronto Islands, you turn left. When you see the Eastern Gap, do another left. And then you do your final coming in before you hit the buildings in Toronto. That's what they told me, right? Well, there isn't an actual Home Depot on the first left turn, but still, when they say something that's out there, in X-Plane, there was nothing out there once you got past the airport. I'd buy the airport in X-Plane, and it had perfect everything in the airport. The plane was perfect in perfect dynamics. I loved X-Plane. But VFR flying is like, you're not going to go looking at scenery like I do in real life. You're not going to go turn at the Home Depot. There isn't one there. But in Microsoft Flight Simulator, with its photogrammetry and its scenery from all over the world, no matter where you're learning to fly out of the same airport you're learning in the local airport. And when they say there's a Home Depot, you turn left. There's a Home Depot there. It's actually there. It might not be perfect if you get down to ground level. Like land your plane beside it and look up at it and go, ooh, you know, that thing's looking pretty ugly because it's not photogrammic at that point. It's just satellite imagery. It might even be flat. But from the air, it's orange. I can see it says Home Depot. That's the building. That's where I turn. This is cool. I see a river that looks like this. It's there. So I get excited because of the scenery. And then with all the updates, they've made the flight dynamics more realistic. So they finally came along and made flight dynamics much better too. And so we're finishing up here because I'm already into overtime. I see that you guys don't know, but there's this great big timer here that I didn't notice till now until Evan just gave me a sign. So I guess I better wrap it up. All right, so, and take a look in here. You know, on here I say, you know, we've got roads, lakes, all the things we learn about with navigation in learning to fly. We learn to fly out the window, watch to map to ground. We actually see something. Yep, it's on my map. Yep, it's there. I'm in the right place. That we can do now with this simulator. That's why I recommend that you do that if you're learning to fly. Okay, ground school is separate from flying, but I want to mention that you don't need everything that they have in ground school. You see all the X's on there? So one of the things I do recommend is that you actually use a paper-based pilot logbook like this. This is what real pilots use. I got a couple extra blanks here. Would somebody actually want to log their flight? I see a hand here and a hand here right in front of me. So sorry, you guys, I wasn't even looking back there. So this one's for you and this one's for you. This is a blank, brand new logbook that you can have. And I recommend that even though the sim logs it for you, someday that hard drive, and I'm an IT person, someday that hard drive is going to die on you, and there goes your log. Oops. So log it like they do in real life in your logbook and carry that with you. Now, it is a simulator you're logging, so make sure you don't take that to a flight school and show them, because they might kind of chuckle, right? I also recommend, and I'm just going to come back here once, I got to close it up faster here. The rest of it, you've heard the meat of it, you've heard the important stuff, you guys, so I'm recommending if you do have to buy a headset, do not go and get an aviation headset. They're noise canceling, they're made for aviation grade, they're made to be in a noisy plane, they're made to be banged around. You pay a lot of money for an aviation headset. Go get the $20 cheapie there that you see in the top of the screen. That works just fine. You can talk on it to ATC. You'll hear things properly from your computer. Everything's fine. The one I use on the bottom is just, it's good for music too, and I'm a music person, so it's got a bigger diaphragm and it's got a gorgeous sound, and so I like it. It's got a noise canceling mic, but just go with the cheapie to start with. Okay, grab some books if you can, if you'd like to learn the theories. Matter of fact, that purple one, well, it's from Canada because I'm a Canadian, but there's an equivalent one that you would find for the US where they have every skill exercise by chapter. They're all in there. The theory's all there. You could use that and never take a lesson on video, never take a lesson from a CFI, but you could start with that. And as they teach each lesson, you could now start to practice that. The disadvantage is you don't see the demo of it. You don't see them moving the right things. They teach you the theory, you see the diagrams, but it's not everything. You can't learn everything out of a book, right? It is free, yeah, and they have a website, the FAA website too, right? They have all this stuff is there. I mean, they just make it free to everybody. The other thing you see there is actually, I had one with me on the road, but I don't have it right now, but that's a checklist, and that checklist you can use. Every airplane has a checklist. You might have seen it in the movies, but it's actually true because there's so many things on there that you could forget. We're human, so we have checklists to make sure we hit the right switches, we turn the right things on and off, we check things we're supposed to check before we do every phase of flight. And this is what you learn. And that's as simple as that, a two-sided laminated card. And I use that one for simulator. It's a little bit toned down from a normal checklist. And that way you can follow the proper procedures. And that's what you learn. Now, all checklists are in the book that comes with the airplane. Like you see a 150 book there, you see a 172 book. That's called the POH, the Pilot's Operating Handbook. Well, that has, the checklists are in there. Everything else is in there too. We usually read that all the way through, earmark it and highlight it, and we keep it in the plane by law. So you know, that sort of thing. But